Why do you say that in front of everyone, Jimin? Jungkook's voice was hoarse, trembling, and filled with despair. He looked at Jimin, who was standing with a blank look, like he didn't care at all. The live broadcast was still going on, and thousands of army eyes were watching them. No one knew what was going on. Only being able to watch two best friends caught in almost immeasurable tension. Jungkook glanced at the camera with an indecisive expression, half worried, half angry. However, the main attention was on Jimin, who seemed to hear nothing. Why did you do that? You know very well what will happen after this, right? Jimin let out a long sigh. His steps were so calm even though the atmosphere around him was heating up. He looked at Jungkook with an inexplicable look. Was it confusion? Or was it indifference? In that live broadcast, what should have been a simple moment for fans to see the interaction of two best friends turned into an emotional battle that revealed more secrets and fears than they imagined. I can't anymore, Jungkook, Jimin said finally, his voice low but full of emphasis that couldn't be ignored. I don't always want to be in your shadow. It was a devastating sentence, not only for Jungkook, but for the entire world that watched the live broadcast. This news will soon spread, and not only fans, but also the media, will take advantage of this moment to deploy all the questions that have never been revealed before. Jungkook felt like his heart was broken with that one sentence. What do you mean? You know very well that I am always here for you, Jimin. Jimin shrugged his shoulders, ignored those words, and stared out the window. Of course, he knew what Jungkook felt, but it wasn't a problem that could be solved with just words. Over the years, he always felt like he had to follow someone's light or shadow. Now, the feeling is even more burdensome. Meanwhile, Army who watched the live broadcast began to panic, realizing that there was something bigger than just a small quarrel. All the questions about their perfect friendship began to arise. Jimin, don't be like this. We can talk about this, Jungkook said, trying to grab Jimin's hand, but Jimin pulled him back quickly. I'm tired, Jungkook. I'm tired of being part of your shadow, Jimin replied in a barely audible voice. You don't know how it feels. Jungkook was fixed in place, his eyes filled with feelings that were hard to explain. It's not just about their friendship, it's deeper. Jungkook had known for a long time that Jimin harbored unspoken feelings, but he never imagined this would happen so deeply. Jimin, I didn't know you felt this way, but I'm not leaving you. We can overcome this together, Jungkook said, his voice filled with doubt, but also infinite hope. However, Jimin looked at her once again with a look full of his own confusion. You don't understand, Jungkook. You don't understand what I've been through, what I feel every day. I'm not just your best friend. I also have a life to live on my own. With those words, the atmosphere in the room changed drastically. Silence fills the air, replacing all the laughter and jokes that are usually present between them. An invisible wall was formed, higher and stronger than before, separating the two of them. This broadcast must end, Jimin said suddenly, erasing all the warmth that had ever existed between them. Jungkook wanted to talk, but no words came out. Only silence enveloped them, tormenting and disturbing every thought that was trying to digest what had just happened. All the remaining feelings hung in the air, unspoken. That morning, the atmosphere in BTS's rehearsal room was quiet, much different from usual. Jungkook sat in the corner of the room, staring at his phone screen that was still showing the video of last night's live broadcast. The ever-increasing numbers in the comments column no longer amused him. Hundreds of messages from Army filled his inbox, many of them confused, most wondering if their friendship would ever end. Why didn't he pick up my phone? Jungkook thought, staring at the screen in frustration. A missed call from Jimin last night still haunts his mind. Unlike usual, Jimin was always quick to respond, but this time, no. Suddenly the door of the rehearsal room opened with a loud noise, and Junggi entered with a serious expression. Without further ado, he walked over to Jungkook, sat next to him, and stared at the phone screen. Jungkook, you can't go on like this. What happened on that live broadcast? Asked Junggi, his voice deep and attentive. He knew Jungkook was struggling with something big, but Junggi could also feel a tremendous tension. Jungkook took a deep breath. I don't know, Hyung. I think we're fine. But last night, Jimin, he doesn't seem to care anymore. Junggi looked at Jungkook with a sharp gaze. What happened, Kook? Jungkook bit his lip, trying to control the emotions that began to flare up. I always try to support him, Hyung. I was always there for him. But for some reason, last night he said that. He said he was tired of always being in my shadow. Yoongi pondered for a moment, as if digesting those words. You think he's angry because of something you did? Asked carefully. I don't know, Hyung. Maybe. I'm too focused on myself. Maybe I never really listened to him. Junggi nodded, and the two fell into a heavy silence. Jungkook, friendship is two-way. Sometimes we feel that we give everything, but do we also give space for others to speak, to grow? Or do we simply perceive them as part of us, without giving them the opportunity to be themselves? Yoongi's words echoed in Jungkook's head. Maybe all this time she was too focused on her relationship with Jimin without realizing that Jimin also needed space for himself. Jimin is filled with fear and doubts that were never expressed, who now begins to feel trapped in the shadow of someone who is always brighter than him. However, as Jungkook was pondering, the door opened again, this time with Jimin entering with a face he couldn't hide. Jimin's eyes looked tired, like someone who had just woken up from a nightmare he couldn't forget. Jimin. Jungkook attempted to start a conversation, but Jimin raised his hand, gesturing not to speak. I know you want to talk, Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice cold and calm. But I can no longer be like this. We cannot continue to live in the illusion that everything is fine. Jungkook was silent, his heart as if squeezed by Jimin's words. However, he knew that this was a crucial moment, a moment in which everything would change. What do you mean, Jimin? Jungkook was finally able to get those words out, his voice trembling. What are you saying? Jimin looked at him with a sharp look, as if he wanted to make sure that Jungkook was really listening. I've been holding on to everything for too long, Jungkook. I'm afraid of your feelings, afraid of losing this friendship. But I have to be honest, I can't continue to be someone else's shadow. Jimin. Jungkook felt the tightness return to him, but this time, he tried hard to stay calm. We can understand each other. I will never make you anyone's shadow. You're more than that. But you did, Jungkook, Jimin replied, and his voice was now full of strength. You were always in front, always in the center of attention. And I'm just here, in the back, feel invisible. I feel like I don't matter. Jungkook fell silent. A feeling of guilt began to seep into him. I didn't know you felt that way, Jimin. I really don't know. Jimin took a deep breath. I know you don't know. Because you were too busy with yourself. I don't blame you, but I do. I can't go on like this anymore. With those words, Jimin walked out of the rehearsal room, leaving Jungkook and Junggi speechless, immersed in feelings that were hard to explain. As Jimin closed the door loudly, Jungkook sensed how fragile their friendship was. Is this really the end of everything? The next morning, the Seoul sky looked gloomy, as if feeling the anxiety that hung over Jungkook's heart. In the training room, the atmosphere was tense. There was only himself and Junggi sitting there, each immersed in his thoughts. No laughter, no small talk. All felt empty after a devastating conversation the night before. Jungkook looked at his phone again. A message from Jimin that was not reciprocated, and an unopened call that still scratches the wound in the heart. Before, he felt like an inseparable team with Jimin, but now that feeling seemed to crack in an instant. Hyung. Jungkook broke the silence, his voice sounding weaker than he expected. I don't know what to do now. It all feels wrong. Yoongi turned his head, not surprised by those words. Junggi always knew Jungkook had a sensitive side hidden behind his toughness. He knew very well that Jungkook could never ignore someone who meant something to him. You should talk to Jimin, Junggi replied, flat, but there was sincerity behind his words. But you also need to be prepared for the fact that not all problems can be solved with words. Maybe this time, you should listen more. Jungkook nodded, feeling heaviness in his chest. There was nothing more painful for him than seeing Jimin move away, feeling alienated from the person he had always considered a brother. Have you ever heard of Jimin? But, Hyung, what should I say? What can I do? I've tried everything, Jungkook said with regret. Yoongi just shook his head, as if he understood Jungkook's dilemma. Sometimes what we try to do is not enough. You have to understand Jimin's feelings more deeply, not just try to fix everything. Jungkook was silent again. Yoongi's words were like a bullet through his heart. He felt like he had gone too far without understanding how fragile Jimin was inside. However, as the silence grew more muted, the door of the rehearsal room opened with a loud noise, and a member of the BTS management team walked in. It brings unexpected news. Jungkook, Jimin wants to see you. He said there was something to talk about. Their manager said. Jungkook's heart beats faster. Instantly, All the feelings that were pinned up in him were tempestuous. It was the opportunity he had been waiting for, but also the one he feared the most. Without thinking, Jungkook got up from his chair. When? Where? In a private room downstairs. Immediately, the manager replied. Jungkook said nothing more. Without waiting any longer, he walked quickly out of the rehearsal room, followed by Yoongi's anxious gaze, who seemed to know exactly how important this meeting was to Jungkook. The lower floor feels darker, quieter. Only the sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. Jungkook's every step felt heavy, like a weight was pressing more and more on his chest. When he finally reached the door, he took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The door opened, and behind it, Jimin sat with a hard-to-read expression. His face looked tired, his eyes a little wistful, but there was something different in the way he looked at Jungkook. Like there was an unattainable distance between them. Kook, Jimin's voice sounded hoarse, as if weighed down by feelings that had been buried for too long. I don't know where to start. Jungkook felt his tongue stiffen. Jimin. I'm really sorry. I didn't know you felt that way. Jimin raised his hand, gesturing to stop the conversation. Jungkook, you always apologize. But sometimes I feel like you don't know what I need. I feel like I was always in your shadow. Those words jolted Jungkook. He swallowed. The guilt deepened. I didn't mean that, Jimin. I just want to be there for you. I just want us to be together. Jimin shook his head slowly. It's not just that, Kook. I know you're always there for me. But I also want to feel that I have space for myself, without always being overshadowed by the expectations of others. I'm tired, Jungkook. Tired of everything. Jungkook felt his heart break. Jimin, I didn't know you felt this way. I don't know. I'm sorry, I really don't know. Jimin lowered his head, his voice slow but firm. I've made up my mind, Kook. I want to rest from everything, including from us. I need some time to myself. I don't want this to ruin us, but I can't continue to put up with this feeling either. Jungkook fell silent, as if the world around him stopped spinning. Everything he expected was destroyed in an instant. Jimin, his best friend, the one who was always by his side, now says that he wants to stay away. Jimin, don't go, Jungkook said in a hoarse, almost inaudible voice. Sometimes, we have to learn to let go, Kook, Jimin replied softly, but there was firmness behind his words. With that, Jimin turned around, leaving the space with slow steps. And Jungkook could only stand there, devastated, as if his whole world had collapsed. The night sky was so dark, lit only by the city lights flashing from a distance. Jungkook's heart felt entangled in an undefined void. On the busy streets of Seoul, her pace seemed to be getting heavier, as if every passing second was reinforcing the distance between her and Jimin. She sat on a park bench, looking at the dark screen of her phone, not knowing where to start. Jimin, her closest friend, is now like a stranger avoiding her. They are both trapped in a void that cannot be filled with words. Since the meeting, Jimin disappeared. No messages, no calls. There was only a pressing silence, further squeezing Jungkook's chest. His head was spinning with a series of questions without answers. What's wrong with them? Why is the friendship they have always been proud of now in danger of cracking? Every memory with Jimin seemed to fade away, like a mist that slowly disappeared as the sun rose. What do I really want? Jungkook muttered to himself. I can't lose him, but I don't know how to fix it either. His phone vibrated, signaling a new message. Without thinking, Jungkook immediately opened the screen, hoping it was a message from Jimin. However, what appears is a message from Taeyong. Hyung, are you okay? I know it's hard, but don't let yourself sink into sadness. I'm here if you need to talk. Jungkook couldn't help but feel a little relieved. Taeyong's words always gave comfort in the midst of chaos. However, she knew that only one person could truly calm her heart now, and that was Jimin. Jimin is not here. His head was again filled with Jimin's shadow, his tired face, and a look full of doubt as they spoke earlier. Jungkook knew that Jimin was going through something bigger than himself. But why couldn't Jimin see how much he wanted to help? Why does it feel like it can't get enough? The sound of footsteps jerked him out of reverie. Jungkook turned his head and saw Yoongi walking closer. Yoongi sat beside him without saying a word, just leaning his back on the cold garden chair. They sat in silence. No one felt the need to speak first. What happened, Kook? Finally Yoongi asked, breaking the silence. Jungkook took a deep breath, his eyes looking at the gloomy sky. I just feel like a failure, Hyung. I don't know how it got here. All of this feels so wrong. I feel like I've ignored Jimin for too long. I've let him down a lot. Jungkook turned his head and looked at him with a serious look. Sometimes, we can't force everything to go our way. Jimin had his own feelings. We don't know what he feels inside. All we can do is give her space, and if she's ready, she'll come to you. Jungkook bit his lip, feeling increasingly depressed. I can't wait, Hyung. I want to talk to him, listen to how he feels, fix everything. I can't live with this feeling. Yoongi took a deep breath. You are too hard on yourself. Try to let go a little, Cook. We all have our own way of dealing with it. Maybe it's time to give Jimin some space so he can find his own answers. If he wants to come back, he'll come. Jungkook lowered his head, worried. All those words entered his heart, but it was as if there was a part of him that felt reluctant to let go. How could he let go of someone who had long been a part of his life? However, before he could continue the conversation, his phone vibrated again. This time, from an unknown number. Hesitantly, he opened the message. I know we haven't spoken well, Cook, but I want you to know I don't want to lose this friendship. I just need time. Maybe we can meet tomorrow. It was a message from Jimin. Jungkook felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. Although the message was short and seemed cautious, there was hope pinned up in it. Perhaps this is not the end of everything. With slightly trembling hands, Jungkook replied to the message. I'll be waiting for you, Jimin. Whenever you're ready. That morning, the air in Seoul felt a little colder than usual, as if it enveloped Jungkook's heart with a sense of anxiety that never went away. He sat in a small restaurant chair, waiting for Jimin, who had said he would meet him after last night's message. Jimin's face was still clear in his mind, but nothing could prepare him for what was about to happen. Jungkook observed his left hand holding the coffee cup, staring at its calm surface. He felt like he was a broken wave, swaying without a clear direction. Maybe that's how they feel now, two people who were once so close, but are now in a place where they can no longer understand each other. A restaurant door opened and the sound of footsteps was heard, breaking the silence. Slowly, Jungkook turned his head and saw a familiar figure. Jimin entered with a face that was difficult to read, his normally cheerful hair now looking more disheveled, as if following the fatigue that appeared in his eyes. But what was most surprising was his expression, no smile, just a questioning look. Jimin, Jungkook's voice trembled softly, as if trying to welcome something uncertain. Jimin sat down in front of him without a word. There was only a solidifying silence between them, getting thicker and thicker with each passing second. Jungkook waited, hoping Jimin would start, but he simply turned his gaze to the coffee cup on the table. Finally, after a few minutes that felt like hours, Jimin opened his mouth. You know, Cook, his voice was heavy, full of inexpressible feelings. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what happened to us, to our friendship. Jungkook felt something pressing against his chest. Jimin, I'm sorry. I didn't know I made you feel this way. I didn't know I'd hurt you. Jimin lifted his head and looked at her with eyes that were no longer as hopeful as they used to be. You didn't hurt me, Jungkook, he said quietly. But you never really saw me. It's not what it used to be. I feel like I've always been in your shadow, never really been. Those words hit Jungkook hard. Every syllable that came out of Jimin's mouth felt like a knife slicing his heart. He knew it wasn't just about him. It is about the absence that has formed between them, the incomprehension that continues to grow with the passage of time. Jimin, I'm sorry, I didn't know that I made you feel that way, Jungkook tried to explain, his voice breaking. I tried, really tried. Jimin took a deep breath and sighed the air out, as if trying to release the weight that was inside him. I know, Cook. I know you're trying. But that's not enough. Sometimes, we have to look at more than just our efforts. We have to really listen. There was a long pause, as if the words were hanging in the air. They could not be taken away, but they could not be thrown away either. Jungkook felt a growing tension between them. Something bigger than just a misunderstanding, bigger than just a threatened friendship. What do you mean? Jungkook asked, his voice trembling, as if afraid that he might disturb something fragile. I feel disrespected, Cook, Jimin replied, his voice flat but full of meaning. I feel like I'm just being a part of your shadow, not an equal friend. Maybe I expected too much. Jungkook felt as if the world around him began to spin faster and faster, as if he was being dragged into a current he could not control. Jimin, you're not a shadow, you're my best friend. You always have. Jimin shook his head, his tired gaze now meeting Jungkook's eyes. That's the problem. We always talk like this, Kook. Like we used to be. But we've never really changed, and I can't keep waiting. Suddenly, the whole world around Jungkook seemed to stop moving. The words swirled in his head, creating a deep void. What did Jimin say? Is it really over? Jimin, you're not serious, are you? Jungkook's voice choked, unable to believe what was happening. Jimin lowered his head, biting his lip. I don't know anymore, Kook. I need time to think. And I think we need some distance. Slowly, Jimin stood up, leaving Jungkook, who was still sitting speechless. The sound of Jimin's footsteps moving away only reinforced the fact that they were on the verge of parting. Jungkook stared at Jimin's back, his heart breaking. However, before Jimin really left, he paused for a moment and turned his head. His eyes looked at Jungkook with an expression that was hard to read. I just want us both to find our own way, Kook. I can't keep feeling like this. And with that, Jimin turned around and left Jungkook amidst the piercing silence. The winter wind swept over Jungkook's face as he stepped out of the restaurant. His heart felt empty, as if there was a huge unfilled space inside him, a space that used to be full of laughter and togetherness with Jimin. Now, however, there is only a vacuum that is increasingly gnawing. Jungkook took a deep breath, trying to calm his chaotic mind. Every second that passed since Jimin left her was like a flash of disconnected memory, forcing herself to ponder about every word that had been said. I need time to think. We need distance. The words swirled in his mind. Jungkook's footsteps were heard along the deserted sidewalk, the sound of shoes echoing under the dim light of street lamps. Like a stalled time machine, it felt like it was walking in a gripping void, with no clear direction. The further he went, the heavier his step became, as if he were carrying an invisible burden. When he got home, he went straight to his bedroom. Without having time to take off his jacket, he fell onto the mattress and stared at the ceiling. The thoughts again come, is it all over? What should he do now? Every conversation, every moment they pass together, now feels as if only memories are fading away. Flashback to live broadcast ***. It was the live broadcast that changed everything. At that time, everything seemed to be as usual. Jungkook and Jimin were sitting in the living room, along with several other members, chatting lightly with fans. However, a question from one of the fans that night made Jungkook flabbergasted. Jungkook, how do you feel about all the news about Jimin and your friendship? Asked the fan. Suddenly, the atmosphere became tense. Jungkook could feel how Jimin's eyes narrowed, his face looking anxious. Without thinking, Jungkook replied, We're fine. There's nothing to worry about. We support each other. However, after the broadcast was over, Jimin approached and said, Why did you say that? Do you think we can't be honest with our fans? I feel like we're playing with their feelings. Back to the present ***. Jungkook closed his eyes, trying to avoid the reality that was increasingly pressing on his chest. I'm just trying to protect you, Jimin. But why does it feel so far away? His mind was again interrupted when his phone rang. Reluctantly, he grabbed the phone and saw who was calling. The name on the screen made his heart flutter. It was Jimin. Hesitantly, he picked up the phone. Jimin. Jungkook's voice trembled, still surprised to suddenly get this call. At the other end, Jimin's voice sounded hoarse. Kook, I want us to talk. There's something I need to say. Jungkook's heart was pounding. What is it? What happened? Jimin was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. I feel scared, Kook. I feel like we never really knew each other. There is so much we hide from each other. Jungkook could hear the despair in Jimin's voice. I'm afraid we've come too far to go back, but I can't continue like this. His voice stopped again. There was only a long silence between them, elongated and pressing. I want to try again, Kook. Looking for a way to restore our friendship. But I don't know how either. Jungkook held his breath. I want that too, Jim. I can't live with the shadows between us. I want us to be honest, more than this. Silence again enveloped. However, this time there was a faint hope, as if those words were a door that opened a little gap towards the possibility of fixing everything. I'll come to your place tomorrow, Jimin finally said, his voice quieter. Let's talk some more. Okay? Good, Jungkook replied, in a lighter voice though his feelings remained bound by doubt. When the call ended, Jungkook stared at his phone with a confused mind. What will happen tomorrow? Will this be a turning point for their friendship, or will it only make matters worse? That morning, the air was cold even though the sun began to rise slowly on the eastern horizon. Jungkook sat on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the busy city, but his thoughts were far away. Every second that passed felt heavy, as if time was running slowly. A feeling of anxiety enveloped him, overshadowing every action he took. Last night, after a hopeful phone call, Jimin finally said he would come to his place this morning. The two of them have set themselves up for a conversation, one that will set the course for their increasingly fragile friendship. However, even though the feeling of wanting to fix everything was there, Jungkook could not resist the fear that gnawed at him. What should I say? Are there enough words to fix everything? Jungkook took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, although his heartbeat still felt fast. No one knows how much of a burden he feels right now. He was not only dealing with Jimin, but with his own feelings that had been hidden, buried deep. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell startled him. Nervously, he stood up and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw Jimin standing there, his face serious but a little tired. They stared at each other, momentarily silent, as if not knowing where to start. "Come in," Jungkook said in a deep voice. Jimin nodded slowly, then stepped in. The atmosphere in the living room is cold, although the room is bright and warm. The two men sat on the sofa. The distance between them was great, as if there was an invisible wall that limited the conversation. I don't know where to start." Jimin finally opened the conversation. His voice sounded tense, different from what was usually heard in their previous conversation. Jungkook stared at him in silence, waiting for Jimin to continue. However, what came out of Jimin's mouth next completely destroyed the hopes that had begun to grow in Jungkook. "I feel like we've gone too far, Kook. I know I was wrong too, but I can no longer pretend everything is fine. I cannot continue to live in the shadow of what we once were." Jungkook fell silent, feeling like he was suddenly attacked. Those words pierced his heart, deeper than he thought. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jimin bit his lower lip, trying to hold back the almost spilled feelings. "I feel trapped, Kook. There are always high expectations from us, from everyone. I feel like we never really live for ourselves. We always live for others. Dan, I'm scared, Kook. I'm afraid we'll continue to get caught up in this routine, never really knowing who we really are." Jungkook felt the world around him begin to spin. "What are you saying, Jimin?" he thought, but he couldn't put out the right words. I don't know if I can go on like this," Jimin continued, with a voice that began to break. "I'm afraid we will destroy each other." Silence. The silence was so heavy that Jungkook felt like he was trapped in a narrow space. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak, but the words felt heavy, like something was tightly wrapped inside him. "We can't just talk about these feelings, Jimin. We've shared so much. Why now are you saying we can't go back to the way we used to be?" Jungkook's voice was a little shaken. Jimin lowered his head, as if the words felt sharper than he expected. "Because, Kook, I feel like we've gone too far. There are so many lies we never tell. And now, I don't know who we are anymore." Jungkook felt his chest tightness. Lies. What does it mean? He didn't know what to do, because he felt like something that had been hidden for a long time had finally broken. The feelings he had kept for a long time, the hopes he had, all now turned into fragments that could not be put back together. "Jimin," his voice was hoarse. "You know how much I care about you, don't you?" Jimin raised his head, his gaze full of confused emotions. "I care about you too, Kook. But sometimes that feeling isn't enough." Jungkook's eyes were red, anxious, and confused. "Is this the end of us? Can't we go back to the way we were before?" Jimin was silent for a moment, his face filled with doubt. "I don't know, Kook. I really don't know." Jungkook sat quietly in the living room, his gaze blankly gazing out at the large window overlooking a city that now felt much stranger. His mind swirled, trying to digest what Jimin had just revealed. Jimin's words were like a sword through the protective wall of his heart, and now he felt broken, without direction, that he feels like someone who has lost himself in a long search for a friendship that should be a safe place. What they had now felt fragile, more fragile than he had ever imagined. Although Jimin said that he cared, those words were not enough to fix everything. The bitter truth seemed to strangle him. Outside, the sky gets darker, reflecting Jungkook's increasingly gloomy mood. He heard the sound of the door opening, and just then, Jimin's figure appeared in the doorway, slowly entering the living room. Jimin's face looked tired. His eyes showed an inexpressible sense of despair. Jungkook. Jimin's voice sounded quiet, and to Jungkook, it was like a sound coming from a distance, like something he could no longer touch. I know it's hard, but I don't know what else to do. Jungkook looked at him without saying anything. The tension between them grew heavy, dominating every corner of the room. Unbeknownst to them, time is running fast, and the two are trapped in a deeper silence than they've ever felt before. Jimin approached a little, trying to form words that could unravel this impasse. I don't want to lose you, Kook. I really don't want to. Jimin's voice sounded fragile, almost like a plea. But I can't go on like this either, living a life I don't feel like I really want to. Jungkook turned his gaze to the floor, trying to hold back the tears that had almost fallen. What do you want, Jimin? What can we do to fix this? His voice broke, caught between hope and destruction. Jimin took a deep breath. I don't know. I just know that we have to stop hurting each other. He looked at Jungkook with an intensity that he rarely showed. We've been procrastinating for too long, pretending for too long that everything is fine. Jungkook felt tightness in his chest. The words were like an inevitable blow. They are already trying, but in fact, over time, the more pent up, the more lost. The trust, the comfort, even the laughter that used to be present in every conversation now feels like a fading memory. I don't want to stop being your friend, Jungkook said, his tone barely audible, filled with regret. But I don't know if we can go back to the way we were. Jimin was silent. He knew that Jungkook was struggling with his own feelings. Jimin also cannot escape the fact that their relationship has changed. It may even be too late to return to the past. I know, Kook. I know we can't go back to the way we were. He lowered his head, trying to hold back the tears that had been held back for a long time. Jungkook closed his eyes, as if trying to find clues from within himself. He felt confused, not knowing what to do. Then what should we do now? He asked, his voice almost inaudible, filled with despair. Jimin lifted his head, his eyes filled with sadness. We have to stop dragging on this pain, Kook. We must choose whether we will continue to hurt each other, or we will try to escape from this increasingly heavy burden. Jungkook felt the words were so heavy. Release? It felt like a defeat, a betrayal of everything they had built together. However, is there another way? Is there a way to restore everything? I don't know if I'm ready to let you go, Jimin, Jungkook said in a trembling voice, his eyes enduring unbearable pain. But what happens if we can't go back to the way we were? Silence filled the room once again, and for both, time seemed to stop. What will happen next? Will they choose to continue down this path, or will their friendship end at this point? The darkness of the night is closing the space around Jungkook and Jimin. The silence that reigned in the room was so heavy, as if every second was wasted time, filled with anxiety and regret. Jungkook stood by the large window, staring out at the bustling city, but his heart felt empty. Behind him, Jimin stood in silence, not knowing what to do or say. Are we really going to stop here? Jimin's voice broke, disturbing the silence. He approached slowly, his steps stopped a few meters from Jungkook. Are we really going to let it all in like this? Jungkook turned around, his eyes met Jimin's. There is an unspoken sadness there, but there is also a fear that gnaws at them equally. I don't know, Jimin, Jungkook replied hoarsely. I wish we could fix this, but I'm afraid we've fallen too far. I'm afraid we've gone too far from each other. Jimin bit his lip, trying to hold back the emotions that began to surge. He knew that the two of them were already at their lowest point, but the feeling still continued to disturb him, gripping him tightly in his chest. Jungkook, Jimin's voice trembled slightly. I never meant to hurt you. But I can't continue to live a lie either. Can't keep pretending everything is okay. Jungkook let out a long sigh, his eyes gleaming with an inexpressible feeling. I never asked you to pretend, Jimin. But why should we hurt each other? Why should we let our mistakes ruin what we've built so far? Jimin lowered his head, as if trying to find the answer in the silence of the night. I'm scared, Kook. I was afraid that if I continued with you, I would lose myself. I am afraid I will continue to be trapped in the shadow of the past and cannot move forward. Those words were like daggers piercing Jungkook's heart. Is that so? Has everything they've experienced been forgotten? The desire to maintain this friendship is growing gloomy. There is no going back to the good old days. So, this is the end of us? Jungkook asked in a low voice, full of confusion. Have you made up your mind, Jimin? Jimin lifted his head, his usual bright eyes now looking faded. I don't know, Cook. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to live in this pain anymore. The decision seemed like an increasingly heavy burden, and when Jimin said so, it felt like their world that was once full of color was now gone and turned gray. There are feelings that block, but none of them know how to deal with them. Suddenly, the sound of a door rang out from the direction of the vestibule, and the two of them turned their heads. A huge tall man appeared in the doorway, dressed in a black suit that contrasted with a gloomy mood. What happened here? The man asked in a serious tone, but his face was full of concern. It was Taeyong, their old friend. Jungkook was surprised, while Jimin immediately cast his gaze away. Taeyong, Jimin's voice seemed to stammer. What are you doing here? Taeyong stepped in, looking at the two intensely. I heard from some people that you two are in big trouble. You think you can handle it on your own without help, he said with a warning. Jungkook looked at Taeyong. There was a sense of guilt left in Jungkook's eyes. They do not want to involve others in their problems, but in reality, everything is already much bigger than they think. We're trying to resolve this, Taeyong. Don't worry. Taeyong did not respond to those words, but instead turned his gaze to Jimin. You know, Jimin, the biggest problem is not whether you can survive together or not. The real problem is how you see yourself after it's all over. Jimin lowered his head, as if those words shook the bottom of his heart. I don't know what I want anymore, Taeyong, he said quietly. I'm confused. Taeyong approached, placing a hand on Jimin's shoulder gently. Sometimes, we have to look inside ourselves and ask, what do we really need? Not just what we want. He looked at Jungkook and then back at Jimin. You two must decide, not only for each other, but also for yourselves. Jungkook and Jimin looked at each other, and in that gaze, there was a feeling full of doubt and fear of the future. Will they find a way to forgive each other? Or will the growing sense of abandonment really separate them? That morning, the air was colder than usual. The sun that had just appeared was shining golden, but inside the room where Jungkook and Jimin were standing, everything was frozen. The room that was previously full of laughter and jokes is now filled with tension that can no longer be avoided. A decision must be made. They cannot drag on in this confusion. Jungkook stood by the large window, staring out. His mind is messed up. Something she had always feared was now in front of her eyes, losing the person she thought of as a brother. He could hear Jimin's steps slowly approaching, but his heart seemed to be frozen. Jimin didn't speak, but the discomfort in the air felt heavier and heavier. Finally, Jimin's voice broke the silence. Jungkook, his voice was hoarse, as if holding back tears. I know I've hurt you a lot. I'm sorry, but I also have to choose for what is best for myself. Jungkook turned his head, his eyes flashing with unspoken emotion. You know what, Jimin? It's not just about you or me. It's about us, our friendship. I don't want us to separate just because we're too selfish to understand each other. Jimin looked at her, his eyes full of feelings that were hard to explain. But you don't understand, Jungkook. For too long I have felt trapped in the shadows of unclear feelings. I have to find out who I really am, in spite of everything around me, including you. Jungkook looked at Jimin intently, trying to hold back the feelings he wanted to let go. So, is that it? Will you choose to leave? Jimin couldn't answer. He was silent, as if unsure of what to say. All that he felt was like a storm coming so quickly, leaving behind a rubble of doubt and fear. Taeyong, who had given a warning last night, now appeared again in the doorway. His normally cheerful face now looked serious, even anxious. Jungkook, Jimin. His voice is low, caring. You two need to listen to each other. Do not let the decisions you make today become decisions you will regret for the rest of your life. Jimin averted his eyes, trying to avoid Taeyong's meaningful gaze. He's tired. The neck feels tight. I heard you, Taeyong, but I think I've come too far to go back. Jungkook felt his chest getting tight. There was deep pain, but she knew that she couldn't force Jimin to stay with her if it wasn't what she wanted. I don't know what to do, Jimin. I just wish we could go back to the way we were. But we can't go back to the way we were, Cook, Jimin replied in a voice full of regret. Sometimes, we have to let the past go in order to move forward. Jungkook felt his tears almost spill, but he held back. There was a very heavy feeling inside his chest, like something had broken in him. This is not the way he wants us to go, but sometimes life forces us to accept painful realities. So, is this really the end of it all? Jungkook asked. His voice was so quiet, almost like a whisper. Jimin looked down, his voice barely audible. I don't know, Cook. I just knew I had to step up on my own. I had to find my own way in life. Me. I'm sorry. Taeyoung, who was standing at the door, took a deep breath. Sometimes, we have to accept the fact that some relationships are not destined to last. But that doesn't mean it all ended in a bad way. Jimin raised his head and looked at Taeyoung, as if seeking confirmation of those words. What do you mean? He asked, full of confusion. Taeyoung smiled slightly, but the smile was full of meaning. Sometimes separation is not the end. It could be the beginning of something new. Perhaps, after this, you will find the peace you seek, even if it means walking apart. The words hung in the air, as if to make room for the two to think. Taeyoung walked over, giving the two friends room to stare at each other and soak in his words. Jimin slowly turned to Jungkook, his eyes wet with tears he could barely bear. I will always remember you, Cook. What we have, the memories we make, it will never go away. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Their eyes met one more time. So many pin-up feelings. He nodded slowly, though his heart was broken. I will always remember you, Jim. It doesn't matter what happens after this. At that moment, there was a huge empty feeling inside Jungkook's chest. Although he knew this was a decision to make, it did not lessen the pain he had to feel.